In the age of fan service meaning big money for movie studios, there's very much a feeling that everything worth doing for effect has either already been done or will be at the earliest possible moment. If there's some call from potential audiences to see a big thing on screen, whether that's an adaptation of a hugely successful book series, a sequel, a payoff to something previously seeded, or the meeting of two characters or actors on screen for the first time, the conversation about it happening will already have happened in a boardroom somewhere in Hollywood. It wasn't always like this though, and isn't always now, and sometimes we actually have to be forced to wait for things. Shocking, I know. I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 movie moments we waited years for that lived up to expectations. Number 10. De Niro meets Pacino, Heat. Now, it would be unfair to say that Heat was marketed only on the first ever meeting of Robert De Niro and Al Pacino face to face in a movie, but it certainly played a major part of the conversation. For decades, the pair of acting titans had been the ultimate dream team that never was, well, aside for sharing a movie but no scenes in The Godfather Part 2. It was such a hyped moment that it could barely hope to live up to expectations, but it managed it thanks to how Mann pushes the mythology of each actor within the movie and then lets their screen chemistry deal with the rest. More than a decade later, John Avnet tried to recapture the magic with Righteous Kill, which was solely marketed pretty much on the meeting of De Niro and Pacino yet again. Sadly though, unlike Heat, it was totally garbage, and the cynical marketing ploy was revealed as little more than an actual lie. Number 9. Voldemort returns, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Obviously, Lord Voldemort's first appearance in the Harry Potter movie franchise comes at the end of the first movie, when it turns out that he's been living on the back of Professor Quirrell's head in a twist that haunted my young, impressionable nightmares. But fans of the books and the films had to wait another 4 years before we got to see the real deal. Set against the haunting atmospherics of one spooky graveyard, Ralph Fiennes' supernatural serpentine performance and striking creepy look were everything fans could ever have wanted. He was a colossus, almost viscerally affecting and haunting in a way that's usually reserved for horror movie villains, and the almost flippant command to murder Cedric Diggory is like a grim crown on this reveal. Number 8. Batman's back. Alright, Batman 1989. It might seem shocking now, but back in the 1980s, basically nobody wanted to make Batman after the whole Adam West affair, and interest had waned so much by then that ideas like Batman in outer space were seriously being entertained. It took Michael Uslan's purchase of the rights in 1979 to really kick it back into life, as he expressed his desire to make the definitive dark Batman movie. Sadly, if you'd held your breath at that point waiting for him to make it, well, you'd have died, because it took almost a decade and lots of false starts before the film got out, with fans living on scraps in the meantime. But their patience was totally rewarded, even in spite of criticism against the casting choices, when Burton's film did exactly what Uslan promised. It was a complete game changer and hugely lucrative for Warner Brothers, and proved we were right all along to wait and stay hyped. Number 7. Dory's heartbreaking backstory, Finding Dory. There were some concerns about the threat of demystification in the Finding Nemo sequel focused on telling Dory's story, because her almost casual reveal of the loss of her family in the first movie was as heartbreaking as it was funny. But fans, including star Ellen DeGeneres, who campaigned for a sequel for years by the way, had wanted a follow-up to the original since its release, so there was no derailing this hype train. You give the people what they want, and then they decide whether or not it was worth the wait. But fortunately for all the potential pitfalls, discovering how Dory lost her family made for one of the most emotionally resonant Pixar moments ever, and the whole film remains one of Pixar's most well-rounded sequels in general. Number 6. Cap vs. Iron Man, Captain America Civil War. Partly because of the mix of weirdos and egos brought together to form the MCU's Avengers, there were, unsurprisingly, immediate clashes, with Captain America and Tony Stark in particular seemingly content with swinging their penises about to see whose was biggest or best or more efficient or more sciencey. However, anyone even half aware of the comics should know this antagonistic behaviour was all a big nod towards the Civil War story event that saw the heroes at war over superhero registration. And even before Civil War was announced as a movie, or a version of it anyway, the tensions between the two were played upon repeatedly, so we knew something was going to come eventually. Thankfully, all that build-up burst out into an emotionally charged ballet of violence at the end of the third Captain America movie, as Stark learned the truth about his parents' murder. This was way more than just a clash of egos, way more than just seeing which hero was better. It was deeply, sadly personal, and it delivered in a way a pure adaptation of the comic would have failed to do. Number 5. Bond returns, Casino Royale. Even with rumblings of coming changes to the James Bond franchise and 2 disappointing releases, Pierce Brosnan wasn't officially dropped as Bond until February 2005. The franchise had by then become too silly, bloated and a cliche, and change was badly needed. But the evolution of Bond that we knew was coming also heaped hype onto the eventually announced Casino Royale. Fortunately, thanks to its blend of grit, Bourne-influenced action, and a different, darker Bond, it delivered in a way that took even the most ardent James Bond fans by surprise. This was Bond as it should have been since the 1980s, when Timothy Dalton's version was tragically rejected. Number 4. Darth Vader Weapon, Rogue One. One of the more contentious additions to Rogue One during reshoots was the Darth Vader scene right at the very end, which saw Annie finally putting aside his emo pining and inner turmoil from the prequels and give fans some indication of why he was so feared by the time he turned up in A New Hope. Some might not like it, but the moment delivers on everything it needed to, and it rescued Vader from some of the more distasteful moments of the sad Anakin era. Seeing him cutting through enemies like butter in a beautifully choreographed, stylishly designed sequence was a big moment for OG Vader fans and was outright glorious. Number 3. Woody gives Andy up, Toy Story 4. When Pixar announced a 4th Toy Story movie in 2014 after a couple years of rumours, some people were very concerned about the ending of Toy Story 3 being undone. That full stop had already been lovely and satisfying, so it wasn't really necessary to have a follow-up, was it? Surely the only way for that to work would be for them to deliver a more definitive ending for the series' main character, Woody. But then in the end, Toy Story 4 explored more of Woody's relationship with Andy, hinting more at his tragic backstory and decades of redundancy before he finally met his first owner. And it was wonderful. Not only did the film completely justify its existence, it also delivered the true satisfying ending we didn't even know we were missing. Number 2, Thanos does it himself, Avengers Infinity War. He might not have been played by the same actor, and his motives might have been a little less obviously set, but Thanos did originally appear way back in 2012 in the first stinger for the Avengers. That brief moment mapped out exactly where the MCU was headed, even with some diversions thrown in along the way, and who was coming, even if a bunch of us did have to immediately Google him to pretend we knew who he was to save face. It eventually took Marvel a little longer to set exactly where they were headed in terms of specifics, but we could bank on the fact that Thanos would stop hiding behind the plans of minions and subordinates eventually and come and do it himself. He even said so at the end of Avengers Age of Ultron. And after so long sitting on the sidelines, he could have crumpled under the weight of hype. But instead, Thanos blossomed in Infinity War, making an instant mark by killing both Heimdall and Loki after decimating Xandar off-screen. Putting aside all of what came next, those first scenes where he bats Hulk away, incapacitates Thor as if he's not an actual Superman god, and kills off 2 supremely powerful characters really delivered. Number 1, the Battle of Helm's Deep, Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. Up until Peter Jackson turned his hand to making them, the Lord of the Rings books were arguably the most eminently adaptable stories ever that hadn't made it to the big screen. Well, at least not as a live-action movie. By the time the film came to the big screen though, Jackson had been considering how to make it for a fair old while, far longer than the 6 years it took him to decide to take it on as a production in 1995. And because of the unspoken, impossible history of the Lord of the Rings' potential, it was inevitable that there'd be greater hype heaped on the grand moments that wouldn't have been possible before the late 90s. Seeing orcs and trolls and balrogs was undeniably incredible, but seeing thousands of them all smushed together in one place for a pitched battle was always that added bit more special. So when the Battle of Helm's Deep kicked off, it came with decades of weight behind it, and the fact that it was so stunning, so spectacular, and so much of a multi-pronged sensory experience is still incredibly impressive even now. So that's our list. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Did these moments live up to the hype for you guys, and are there any that I missed off here? Either way, while you're down there, could you give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to whatculture.com for more lists and news like this every single day. Even if you don't, though, I've been Josh. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.